On November 8, 1973, the top story leading the news was the high-stakes diplomatic peace talks happening between two nations at war. Israel and Egypt were meeting for initial negotiations to try to end the Yom Kippur War. It was a huge deal. The war had claimed thousands of lives by that point. The peace talks led the news that night ahead of another historic domestic crisis that was playing out before the American public.
The Watergate special prosecutors today finally found a significant discrepancy. The discrepancy strongly suggested that someone interrupted the automatic White House recording system in the hours immediately before or after important conversations between the president and John Dean. The Watergate special prosecutors described the inconsistency between the White House logs and the automatic recording equipment as unexplained and substantial.
The Watergate missing tapes, 18 and a half minutes of conversations between the president and his advisors that mysteriously went missing during the Watergate investigation. President Nixon would eventually blame the missing tapes on his secretary, Rosemary Woods. Nixon's secretary played along and even tried to physically demonstrate how she might have deleted the recordings to an incredulous press who dubbed her explanation the Rosemary Stretch. Those missing 18 and a half minutes would become an infamous and enduring part of the Watergate cover-up for years to come. Now, today, as Russia and Ukraine engage in peace talks, none other than Watergate reporter Bob Woodward and his reporting partner Bob Costa broke a new story about missing Trump White House records. Here's the headline from the Washington Post. Quote, January 6th, White House logs given to House show 7-hour gap in Trump calls. Washington Post reports that records of Trump's phone calls turned over to January 6th investigators have a 7-hour and 37-minute gap from just before the insurrection started until right around the time the police started clearing the Capitol. The records that do exist show Trump called at least 8 people in the first 2.5 hours of his morning and another 11 people in the evening on January 6th. But from roughly 11 a.m. to nearly 7 p.m. as the Capitol was being attacked, nothing. The Washington Post reports that the January 6th investigation, quote, is now investigating whether Trump communicated that day through back channels, phones or of aides, or personal disposable phones known as burner phones, end quote. The committee is also scrutinizing whether it received the full logs from that day, with one lawmaker on the panel saying the committee is investigating a possible cover-up of the official White House record. Joining us now, Dan Goldman, former assistant United States attorney, former majority counsel during Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. Dan, good to see you tonight. How big a deal is this nearly 8-hour gap in White House call records on the day of the attack? Do they indicate a likely cover-up, and is there a way for the investigators to actually figure out what happened in that time and get those records?
Well, it certainly indicates something nefarious, because either the Trump administration concealed the logs, erased them, or did not include them when they turned over presidential records to the National Archives, which is where the January 6th committee got the logs from. Or it means that he was trying to avoid a record of the phone calls that he was making during the insurrection. So there's no real good possible explanation for him. We do know, though, that he made phone calls during that time. We know that he called Senator Tommy Tuberville, but called on Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee's phone. We know that he spoke to Kevin McCarthy after the rioters bombarded the Capitol. So we know that there were phone calls. And the way that the January 6th committee can try to sort of reverse engineer what occurred that day is through other witnesses and other phone records. And they can analyze those phone records that they've gotten, some of which are subject to litigation right now, but others I'm sure that they have, and try to determine who those other people were talking to and whether they were speaking with Donald Trump. They can also match that up with testimony from other witnesses who might have said that they spoke to Trump on that day. So there are ways of figuring it out, but it is certainly an alarming and very conspicuous absence of information.
So in response to today's report, Donald Trump claimed He didn't even know what a burner phone was. Now, the former Trump official John Bolton has already rebutted that today, saying that the president spoke about burner phones apparently all the time. Can the committee subpoena something like burner phone records? Do things like that exist?
No, that's the whole point of a burner phone. They're often used by drug dealers and mobsters to evade detection. They're bought in they're prepaid phones essentially that don't require you to give truthful identification information. You can go into any store and just buy a prepaid phone for 30 days or a certain number of minutes, and you don't have to give any information. And so that's why criminals use them, is they're really not traceable, and you can't figure out who is talking on them unless you get someone on the other end of the phone who says, oh, yeah, this number that I called was, Joe Schmo, and that's how you can figure it out. So burner phones are widely used by criminal enterprises so that a record of phone calls does not exist.
Dan Goldman, you and I have had some weird conversations over the years, but talking about a president using a burner phone definitely is somewhere close to the top of the list. Good to see you, my friend. Dan Goldman is a former assistant United States attorney and former majority counsel in the first impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump.